So I'm going to talk about this ERC project that I submitted 6 months ago, which passed step 1, and I think I'll hear about step 2 sometime in the summer. So the title is Detection of Early Seismic Signals Using Artificial Intelligence, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. The participants are mainly Andrea Niccardi, who started a postdoc with Jean-Paul and I in January, Bertrand Rouet-Leduc in Los Alamos in the USA, who's a machine learning expert, especially applied to seismology, Jean-Paul, Kevin Duel, who provided some materials and who now I think left academia, so I'm not sure he will be part of this anymore. And maybe later, Jean-Mathieu will join us if we look at GPS. So the budget is about 1.5 million, and I want to insist on the credit to Martin for this pretty cool logo, which I was completely unable to do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So yeah, as Martin said, I'm not going to show any results because I don't have any. Maybe later, in a few months, Andrea will, and will show us all of that. So this is just going to be about some plans and ideas. So here is my view of machine learning, at least the supervised version of it. You got a training phase, which applies to any inputs, if you know the output, and then a prediction step with another input, which will predict an output. And so this is very general, very, very general. And what I want to insist on is that the input for training can be anything you know. The output can be anything you know too. And then for prediction, the input can be anything you know, and the output will be anything you want to know. So this is very, very general, and potentially that can be applied to the prediction of anything as long as you have enough data. So it can be used to answer any question you want. So now the question is, what question do we want to answer? And so far, the algorithms in machine learning, the machine learning algorithm in earthquake problems mainly focus on things like face picking. There is a tremendous amount of algorithm which arrived in the market. I think at AGU there was like 20 of them for face picking. And the idea behind face picking is to automate some manual process in order to build some more complete earthquake catalogs, to have a better knowledge of earthquakes. And the ultimate goal is always to have a better chance at one day predicting earthquakes. People do fault mapping too, especially here, like Isabelle and her postdoc. And the idea here is also to have a better knowledge of faults, a better knowledge of the relationship between faults and earthquakes, to one day maybe have a better chance of predicting earthquakes. We also have some people who try to predict the lab quakes, so earthquakes in the lab, tiny, tiny earthquakes. And this is also a first step to one day predict real earthquakes. So it seems that the question we really want to answer is really to predict earthquakes. So the idea here is to shortcut all these intermediary steps and try to directly address this problem and predict earthquakes. So now the question is, how do we do that? The basic idea, really the basic idea, it can be summarized like this. We got some training data because we got lots of seismograms recorded for many, many years in many, many places. And some of them were followed by large earthquakes. So we can design a training data set with half of waveforms, which are just noise, with nothing happening after. And the output for them in the training phase will be 0. And the other half of the training set will be some kind of waveforms, except that they will be followed by an earthquake, and they will be labeled 1. So there is nothing apparently different between these two waveforms. They are just labeled with respect to the later of occurrence of an earthquake. And so if we do that, theoretically, then you can, in the prediction phase, you can test any waveform you want, and this will output you zeros or ones. Zero means that there's nothing that is coming, and one meaning there's an earthquake coming. You can make it a little bit more complicated and interesting by changing the label. Instead of just zeros and ones, you can add other information like the distance between the station and the source. This is easy because you know when these earthquakes happen and you know where it happened afterward. And you can also add something like the magnitude. And so if you add that to the label, then in the prediction phase, you will not only predict whether there's going to be an earthquake or not, but you can also predict its magnitude and its distance to a given station. So if you have many stations, potentially you can triangulate its location. So of course, there are some big assumptions behind this. And the main one is that large earthquakes are preceded by a precursory signal hidden in seismological data, which we are not sure of at all. And other difficulties are that there's not that many large earthquakes to train algorithms on, and we don't know what we are looking for. This alone wouldn't be so much of an issue because we can label the waveforms just based on the later occurrence of an earthquake, but only if we have many large earthquakes. So that's the conjunction of these two difficulties that make the problem really hard. So let's start with the signal we know to make things a little bit more simpler. Here is the signal we know. We haven't known it for long because it was basically identified on seismograms in 2017 by Martin Vallée and Jean-Paul. And this signal has been called prompt elastogravity signals. We'll see why. And basically, so this is Tohoku here. So magnitude 9 in Japan. These are some stations which are pretty far from the source. And these are the waveforms which were recorded before Tohoku. So 0 is the origin time of Tohoku. You have to remember that the peak of the source time function is at about 90 seconds. So it's around here. And you can see that so the waveforms have been cut at the P wave arrival time. So presumably there is nothing before P wave, so we shouldn't see anything, but Martin did see something. You can see that there is a consistent decrease in these seismograms. So I should specify that this is the scale, this is 1 nanometer per second square. So this is these are differentiated in accelerograms. And the origin of this signal has been identified by Jean-Paul. And it is basically due to the perturbation of the gravity field due to the mass redistribution of the earthquake. An earthquake like Tohoku is probably 500 kilometers wide, 200 kilometers long, or the other way, and with an average slip which is probably of a few meters. So it's a huge mass which has moved and that perturbates the gravity field of the Earth. And this is a signal which travels at the speed of light because it's a gravity wave. It's gravity. And this is the theoretical signal due to this gravity perturbation in green. But unfortunately, you got an induced effect which is due to the elastic response of the Earth, which is represented in blue, and is of the same sign, I guess opposite sign, but you get a difference here. And so pretty much compensates the direct signal. And what you can record is the black line, which is the resultant from the two, which is of much smaller amplitude and also is seeable long afterward. You can see the green curve separating from the black from zero much earlier than the black one. So another project that Jean-Paul has is to distinguish between, basically to be able to separate these two signals and only see the green curve with a special instrument designed for this purpose. There is a NIRC synergy proposal submitted by Jean-Paul and others on this issue. So this is it. So this is a zoom of the same waveforms. So red is data, black is the theoretical value for Tohoku, so for a magnitude 9 earthquake, and blue is the theoretical value for a magnitude 8.5 earthquake. So that's another thing that is interesting, is that you can clearly differentiate a magnitude 9 from the magnitude 8.5. And that's something that you cannot do with early P waves, because instruments saturate. So they are very interesting, these signals are very interesting in terms of early warning, because there's potentially information about the magnitude of the earthquake very early in the signal. The problem is that, once again, this is 1 nanometers per second square, and that's for magnitude 9. So this is a very, very tiny signal, which is difficult to identify by eye. So an approach with machine learning has an interest here, because you want to extract a low amplitude signal in noisy data, which is exactly what machine learning is good for. So as I said, there is very interesting potential applications for early warning, because to have a reliable estimate of the magnitude, we usually wait for surface waves, which happen very late, especially at teleseismic distances. So you have to wait for very long to have a reliable earthquake magnitude estimates, and this is even too late for tsunamis. So tsunami systems today, in order to get an information earlier, rely on W phases, which happen sometime after P waves. They are less reliable than surface waves, but much earlier. So that gives you some more information, which is useful. But here we can probably, with PEGs, obtain some reliable information much earlier and build tsunami early warning systems much more efficient. And maybe that could be used for earthquake early warning systems too, because it's very early. And so the second thing which is really interesting about this PEGs signal for what we're interested for is that we know how to model them, thanks to Jean-Paul. So Kevin Juel provided us with a pre-constructed database of PEGs, which allowed us to produce as many synthetic PEGs as we want in any configuration we desire, meaning for any earthquake source in terms of magnitude, location, mechanisms, and for any receiver location and at any time. So we can build a very large and exhaustive training data set, which is what a machine learning algorithm needs. How do we do that? So in details, we can compute PEGs for a given synthetic source at some stations. So these will look like this. And then we can add noise directly collected on the actual stations. So this is very realistic because we just take the noise from the stations. So we add the noise to the computed PEGs, the synthetic PEGs, and we obtain something like this on the three components of each stations for each synthetic source. Now the key point is that there is a lot more information in a station network than in one station. This this is particularly visible in these waveforms. If I were to show you, I don't know, maybe this one alone, you could tell me, and you would be right, okay, this decrease here, you can see pretty much the same one here. This is just noise. But the consistency between all these stations tells you that there's something more. And we know about these consistencies and the relationship between the waveforms, shapes, the waveform patterns, and the source, thanks to the pre-computed database of Kevin. So yeah, one can locate an earthquake with 3 stations, not with 1. That's obvious, but present machine learning algorithms in seismology pretty much all use 1 single station, even to locate earthquakes, which probably explain why earthquake locations with current machine learning algorithms is not very accurate. So remember that the training inputs can be anything we want and have any shape. So instead of using 1 seismogram as 1 input sample, we can use a set of waveforms recorded on all the stations of a given network. So this is what it looks like. So we consider 1 source with a given location, a given magnitude. We can also make vary the source time function, the rate, the strike, the dip, anything we want. We compute the theoretical answer at all the stations of a given network with noise collected on these stations. And then we build these objects here, which are 1 training data sample. And the shape of this object, which is a 3D tensor, is like this. You got some pixels with time in the x axis, stations in the y-axis, and each pixel has 3 values, 1 for each component. As it so happened, this object here has the dimension of an image. Images are a bunch of pixels, and each pixel has 3 values, which code the color in RGB format. So basically what we have are images, and it's a very good thing because machine learning has had its best results in image recognition thanks to the emergence of convolutional neural networks, CNNs. Basically, there are a bunch of steps, convolution steps and max pooling steps, which are basically concatenation of pixels. And what they do is that you give the algorithm a bunch of images of animals, and you specify the label in the training phase. You say, okay, this is a dog, this is a person, this is a cat. And once you trained it, it's going to be able to recognize an image it has never seen before, and will tell you, okay, this is a fish. So now what we can do is switch animal images with our 3D-dimensional object here, our waveform images. And as a label in the output phase of the training, we can specify the location and the magnitude of the synthetic earthquake which has been used to produce this object. So this is the idea, and now comes the proof of concept. So Bertrand Rouet-le-Duc came here for a week, like 6 months ago, and he was in my office for 4 days, and we worked on this, and we were pretty happy about the results. So this was just to show that you can reliably identify pegs in this object with this method. So here the idea was just to get a bunch of 0 or 1s, 0 for yes, there is a pegs, no, there is no pegs, and 1, yes, there is a pegs. So here is the shape of our input data. This is 1 sample. This is time, once again, this is the stations. We did that only on the vertical component. Now we're doing all the components. And so half of the training data set contained pegs, and the other half contained waveforms, but without pegs, just with simple earthquakes, with no pegs before. And we saturated the values to a very low value. So each time everything which happens after the P wave arrival is saturated. So you see these dark red colors here as soon as you get to the P wave. So the idea was not to use the P wave information in that. And the algorithm was able to recognize 100% of the times which input were computed with pegs and which were computed with just like normal earthquakes with no peg signal. So we were pretty happy about that. And you can also look at what pixels were used in the decision to tell if there is a pegs or not. And you can see that, that these are these red pixels here. They correspond to the blue pixels here, which correspond to pegs. And what's interesting is that they arrive, you can see some signal much before the P wave arrives, in some cases 20 to 30 seconds, because the P wave here only arrives around here. And you can see some red pixel over here. Okay, so this was just the proof of concept. Now we are doing more concrete things. So this is what Andrea is doing during his postdocs. So I'm just going to show you the setup of what he does, and in a few weeks, months, he'll show you the results. So I just stole 3 slides from our last meeting with Andrea. So here is the station, the configuration. The blue stations are from RFnet, red are ARIS, and the green dots show you the synthetic location of earthquakes. So we took them on the megathrust. So that's it, about 100 stations. And 1,400 source locations, but 200 and 1,000 synthetic events, because Andrea makes the magnitude vary from a uniform distribution, 7 to 9.5. The depth doesn't vary much for numerical issues, but we'll get to it at some point. So the source location vary according to this map. It stays on the fault. The rate varies based on this distribution, so it's a normal distribution centered in 90 degrees. And more importantly, we make the source time function vary according to a template by Meyer et al. With some noise on top of it. So we got very realistic source time functions. And this is the algorithm, which has been designed by Andrea and Bertrand. So this is the input image with the waveforms, and these are the steps, convolutions, max poolings, and at the end, you get the location and magnitude. And there is another algorithm used by Bertrand Rouet-Leduc, which instead of magnitude and location, inputs you 0 or 1 just for the detection phase. Is there an earthquake based on pegs or is there not? So that's pretty much it. So the future prospects on the pegs are Andrea's results on earthquake location and magnitude characterization from pegs. Bertrand's results on the detection phase, which is something we are doing with him in parallel. There is a PhD thesis which is going to start in the fall. Gabriela Arias is going to come work with me and Jean-Paul and Andrea and Bertrand on an arts fellowship. And our job will be to apply what Andrea and Bertrand did in Japan in South America. Then the plan is to apply it to the whole world and maybe to just have one algorithm for the whole world, but that's something that we'll do if the ERC is funded. And then the final goal will be to implement this in real time. So there will be the two CNN algorithms, one continuously running in real time for earthquake detection, Bertrand's algorithm, and the second one triggered by the first one for estimation of the earthquake location and magnitude, so Andrea's algorithm. So now you remember that I told you that pegs were just the first signal we are going to use because it's easy, because we can model it, so we can produce synthetics and train the algorithm on many samples. But the final goal will be to look at even earlier signals. And actually, pegs is a good indicator that there might be some earlier signals that we haven't discovered yet. Because until 3 years ago, we were not aware of the existence of pegs, even though they were always here. So maybe there's something we haven't seen that is still hidden in the noise of seismic data somewhere. And machine learning is a very powerful tool to discover some kind of this kind of low amplitude signal in noisy data. So the idea will be to use pegs as a test bed for precursor detection of other signals. The challenge will be to detect pegs without synthetics, because that's how we can do it. It's because we can produce many synthetics. But the second phase will be to try to do the same without synthetics. And once that's done, we can apply the algorithm to earlier phases and look for precursors, and maybe try it on GPS too. That's where Jean-Mathieu will come in. Some other machine learning related projects. So there is the EINER project by Jean-Mathieu, S5. Jean-Mathieu has presented this project a few weeks ago. There is a package about automatic detection and source parameter estimation of earthquakes in South America. The idea is to rebuild 20 years of earthquake catalogs automatically with machine learning. There is a 2-year postdoc on that I will co-advise. We got some other things under review. The PhD application of Juliette Cressot at DSFA. The idea will be to automatically detect and locate tremors with machine learning and look at their relationship with slow sleep. There's the PhD of Javier Ojeda. So Javier got his own funding from the University of Chile, or from Chile actually. And so he'll spend 1 or 2 years there, and then maybe he'll come here for 1 or 2 years to work with Jean-Mathieu and I, probably on the machine learning related project. There's the ERC synergy project of Jean-Paul, Pegasus. So there are 4 PIs, Jean-Paul Montagnier at IPGP, Matteo Barzuglia at Astrophysique Paris, Astroparticule Paris, and Giovanni Losordo at Virgo. And the idea is to design an instrument for PGS detection. There is no E, because the idea is to only detect the gravity part. And there is some package led by Jean-Paul, which will aim at developing tools such as machine learning to detect pegs on existing data, so seismographs. And there's also the EINER project Fluid to Sleep, led by Audrey Galve, which has similar purposes, which is detect and locate tremors, LFEs, repertors, and earthquakes with machine learning. So that's it.